23 in favor, 8 against, and 2 abstentions. Compromise 2, who is in favor? Who's against? Who abstains? Adopted. Amendment 9, who is in, no, sorry. Compromise 3, who's in favor? Who's against? Abstentions? Adopted. Then we go to Amendment 1, who's in favor? Who's against? Who abstains? Adopted. Amendment 2, who's in favor? Who's against? Who abstains? Adopted. Amendment 3, in favor, against, abstentions adopted. And then the final vote, a roll call vote. I open the vote. We close the vote. It is adopted, 30 in favor, 2 against, 1 abstention, and congratulations to the rapporteur, Mr. Aftias. Next point is section 3, deck 8, roll call vote. The vote is open. The vote is closed. It is adopted, 31 in favor, 1 against, 1 abstention. And then budget other sessions, where we have several propositions which I would like to have briefly presented. First of all, Ms. Ellen Robson, Director General of DG Pers.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. I can present this extremely briefly. Essentially, I'm kindly asking the committee to agree to transfers onto 3 budget lines. The first, €580,000 onto the line allowances for staff retired or placed on leave in the interests of the service. In fact, the 2024 budget was prepared on the basis of estimates from previous budgetary years about the interinstitutional quota for these types of retirements. But the calculation method is based on the total number of officials from all institutions who retired in the previous year. Because of COVID, there have been a higher number of interinstitutional retirements, so our quota has increased somewhat, and we've used that quota. The second is 535,000 onto the budget line learning and development. And this is primarily to address the new mandatory training for members, parliamentary assistants and staff members in relation to ethics, prevention of harassment and transparency, and a number of new strategic corporate courses for staff involved in informatics security, crisis management and artificial intelligence. And the third budget line transfer that we're requesting is 375,000 onto the social welfare budget line. This line is dedicated to social welfare and supports primarily individuals with disabilities. The increase is essentially a result of two phenomena. The first is Parliament's more proactive policies aimed at hiring and retaining staff with disabilities. And the second is that staff members are now better informed about the services that they can receive. For your information, around 2/3 of the budget is assistance or financial assistance with the costs of the specific schooling needs of children with disabilities of staff in the institutions. So you can imagine that an increase of 1 more child substantially increases the commitments on that line. And then finally, we've identified 2 donor lines, the general expenditure allowance with an indexation lower than planned and a lower rate of outgoing MEPs, and a line other specific property management arrangements, which is an in-low budget, which they would transfer to Pers.
Thank you. Next is Margarida Abecassis, Director for Infrastructure and Equipment, DG ITEC, and she can immediately be followed by Kirsten Ludik, Director for Budget and Financial Services, DG Fins. Please.
Thanks. for parliamentary assistants that are currently equipped with obsolete equipment. The well-functioning and up-to-date individual equipment is necessary for the efficient working conditions of members, assistant parliamentaries, and staff. Due to budgetary constraints, the allocated amount on sub-item 21050405 fell far below the calculated amount needed for new individual IT equipment and obsolescence replacement since the beginning of 2024. DG Tech is unable to fund these acquisitions from its own reduced budget, since globally the allocated budget fell far below the calculated requirements of other ITEC budget lines and are also in need of reinforcement. DG ITEC obsolescence replacement plan foresees a 4-year lifespan of portable computers and obsolete devices that are in use since 2019 and before, and 2020, and must now be replaced. The 1 million covers 750 laptops and accessories out of 1,311 that should be replaced according to this 4-year obsolescence policy. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next is for EESC, Mr. Gilles Guillard, Director of Human Resources and Finance.
Thank you very much, Chair. I will be brief as well. The EESC presents 2 transfer requests for limited amounts. One in order to be able to deliver a limited number of trainings following the appointment earlier this year of a new Secretary General at the EESC, and to support a number of structural and management changes to be rolled out. And the second one in order for the EESC to be able to continue to benefit from the ongoing interinstitutional synergies and efforts to replace the CISPR HR tool, which the EESC has been using for years now for cost efficiency reasons via an SLA with the European Commission. The first transfer is for a total amount of 80,000 euros, and it's to deliver 4 different types of strategic trainings. Such as, for instance, to further develop the change of management culture and the use of systemic impact in decision-making. For that one, available appropriations from the donor line come from the fact that we have a lower than expected number of children currently enrolled in childcare, so the donor line is related to that. And obviously, the number of children enrolled in childcare is something which was not known when the budget 2024 was established. The other transfer is for a total amount of 56,000 euros, and it's indeed to allow the EESC to pay its contribution as an institution to the HRT program in the context of the gradual phasing out and replacement of CISPR. Here the donor line is the line for supplementary services for translation because as usual when it's an election year like it was the case for 2024, the demands related to translation usually go down. We have received detailed questions on these 2 transfers, to which we also answered in detail, and I trust that all the information are now available, but of course I remain available if there are any further questions on these. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next for the Committee of the Regions on 2 items is Reinhold Gnan, Deputy Director for Human Resources and Finances. Please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good afternoon. Yes, I would briefly present our transfer request, which covers 2 budget lines, or is intended to reinforce 2 budget lines. On one hand, budget line 1200, remuneration and allowances, with an amount of 60,000 in light of higher salary indexation costs in 2024 than initially estimated at the time of the preparation of 2024 budget estimates. And secondly, budget line 2102 on out priority joint COR EESC IT projects that have been selected from a list of necessary projects that we have drawn up earlier in the year, together with aligned with the objectives of the Digital Strategy 2024 and 2026. So the total amount of the transfer is 254,000 euros. And secondly, we have also we would like to request to modify the establishment plan according to Article 53 of the Financial Regulation, whereby we request the transformation of 2 permanent AST posts under this year's budget, one into a permanent AD post and one into a temporary 2A AST post. The first one is intended to provide support to the core business in the area of internal audit. And the second one is there to allow for the recruitment of a specialized assistant coordinator in the transport sector. Given that the latter is not a permanent task, most likely we would like to transform this into a temporary staff post. We have also received, for both requests, we have received questions that we have answered in writing. And if there are further questions, I'm happy to answer them together with my colleagues here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I pass the floor now to Victor Negrescu, who will speak for Nils Uzakovs, the rapporteur for the 24 budget other sections. Please, Mr. Negrescu.
So, I'm speaking, as you said, on behalf of the rapporteur, Nils Uzakovs, and I have only slight comments. So, on the allocation of €1 million to item 2104 for the purchasing of 750 portable computers, the rapporteur would like to point out that it has been evident that portable computers have significantly facilitated the work of APAS in previous years, which in turn has benefited the work of MEPs. It is well known that computers and laptops need to be replaced every 4 to 5 years to keep up with current technology standards. Since this budget line does not provide enough means to replace all obsolete devices, which are some thousands, the rapporteur would like to understand what is exactly planned in this regard. We would like clarification if more transfer requests are expected and if further replacement for all obsolete laptops are well taken into account next year. Also, what will happen with the obsolete devices in the meanwhile, and if there is possible to extend their lifespan in order to allow them to take use of them. Regarding the transfers for the European Union Social and Economic Committee, the rapporteur supports those transfers and of course acknowledges that there are efforts that are being made in order to improve the work of that institution, of course with several details that he also underlined in the conversations that he had with them. On the Committee of the Region Establishment Plan, 2 from 2024, a modification to convert 2 permanent assistant posts in 1 permanent AD post and 1 temporary assistant post. The rapporteur has a follow-up question regarding the temporary assistant post. Considering the small team of 3 drivers, why is a specialized coordinator needed, and isn't it possible for existing staff to handle the coordination responsibilities? So for the rest, the rapporteur supports the transfers and doesn't have additional questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Negrescu. Any of the rapporteurs or the shadow rapporteurs wanting to intervene? If not, I go back to Mr. Guillard for the specific question that was put down by Mr. Negrescu in name of Mr. Uzakovs. Oh, sorry. Mr. Gnan, sorry. Please, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. The drivers cannot assume the coordination roles due to their contractual status, but it's very important to keep a stable and well-managed team there, especially with the upcoming renewal of the COR mandate in January 2025. So we would we need someone who can guarantee a structured oversight of the scheduling efficiency and ensure that, for instance, a more optimal monitoring of the vehicle maintenance contracts is guaranteed, and that the drivers themselves cannot do. So we need a qualified person to carry out these tasks, which go beyond the normal tasks of the members of the transport team. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Negrescu?
For 3 people, 1 coordinator. Understood. And from the Parliament, the question about computers.
That's then for Ms. Abekasis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Indeed, without further reinforcement, it will not be possible to replace all of the 3,400 portable computers for members, assistant parliamentaries, and staff that become obsolete in 2024, followed by another 7,700 portable computers in 2025, and that's why a further reinforcement will be requested to the committee later in the year.
Thank you. So we go to the vote. We do it in 4 blocks. First on the EP's issues, C2 and C4. Roll call vote. The vote is open. Vote is closed. It is adopted. 30 in favor, 1 against, 2 abstentions. Then we have on the EESC, ENF3 and ENF4. Vote is open. Vote is closed. It is adopted. 27 in favor, 6 against, no abstentions. Third block for the Committee of the Regions, INF2. The vote is open. Vote is closed. Adopted. 27 in favor, 6 against, no abstentions. And lastly, also for the Committee of the Regions, the modification of the establishment plan. Vote is open. Vote is closed. Adopted. 28 in favor, 1 against, 4 abstentions. Thank you. This ends the voting session. And Ms. Hohlmeier will continue to chair the rest of the meeting. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Voilà. Yeah, long day. Anyway, thanks.
So, dear colleagues, let's start with item number 8, budget section 3, Commission exchange of views about DEC 10 mobilization of emergency aid reserve. The Commission transmitted DEC 10 requesting a transfer from the emergency aid reserve on 19th of September. Today we will hear a presentation on that transfer request, and I give the floor first to Lenka Filipkova, Director in DG Budge. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. Indeed, let me present shortly the 10th budgetary authority transfer this year, which we sent you on Thursday. It is actually the second transfer from the emergency aid reserve. You might remember that was one of the first decisions you took in this newly established committee in July, the first transfer when we asked you to agree to transfer 300 million from the emergency aid reserve to the humanitarian aid. Despite these, and at that time, it was already to address mainly the food crisis in Africa, as well as the complex crisis in Ukraine and Palestine. So despite these reinforcements, the humanitarian situation globally remains dire. According to the latest global humanitarian overview, 311 million people are currently in need of humanitarian assistance worldwide. Therefore, I'm presenting today the second transfer from the from the emergency aid reserve, which concerns a reinforcement of humanitarian aid budget by 273 million euros. It addresses again the global food security crisis in Africa and Afghanistan, the Sudan regional crisis and its spillover effects in the neighboring countries, as well as the complex and protracted crisis in Ukraine, Palestine, and Venezuela. Let me shortly address each of these elements. As regards the global food crisis, acute food insecurity remains of great concern. In Central Africa, escalating violence is severely impacting civilians, with food insecurity, malnutrition, and limited access to basic services worsening the humanitarian crisis and leaving many needs unmet. Southern Africa is currently facing an unprecedented drought due to El Niño. Meanwhile, in Afghanistan, almost 13 million people, a quarter of them children, are facing critical levels of food insecurity and need immediate support. Therefore, 81 million euro is proposed to be mobilized for these crises, 41 million for Africa and 40 million for Afghanistan. As regards the Sudan regional crisis and its spillover effects to neighboring countries, Sudan is the largest displacement crisis of the world, with more than 13 million people displaced in total, out of whom 2.3 million people have crossed the border to neighboring countries. According to the 2024 Humanitarian Response Plan for Sudan, 24.8 million people are in need of humanitarian assistance. The funding of 69 million euro proposed in this budgetary authority transfer will be used to address food insecurity, malnutrition, and lack of access to essential services in Sudan and its neighboring countries. Then to continue for Ukraine. As you all know, the humanitarian catastrophe will be reaching its 4th year shortly, while massive Russian attacks continue to pound civilian infrastructure. The additional support would allow continued emergency assistance ahead of the winter season and delivery of basic goods and services to the most vulnerable population. Moreover, the spillover of the crisis to the neighboring Moldova requires additional appropriations to help address heightened vulnerabilities due to increased living costs, primarily from the price of heating in light of the upcoming winter season. 60 million will be provided for these two countries in total, on top of the 40 million included in the previous transfer in July. Furthermore, Gaza continues to face its largest and most severe humanitarian crisis ever, with the population entirely depending on humanitarian assistance. The additional funding of 45 million euro, again asked in this transfer, will be mainly used to urgently address the needs of the most vulnerable in Gaza, focusing on identified gaps for shelter and site management, water and sanitation, logistics and food assistance. And lastly, the political deadlock due to Venezuela's most recent presidential election will deepen the existing social and economic crisis, with 20 million Venezuelans already in need of humanitarian assistance. 18 million euro will be used for health, nutrition and protection in Venezuela, but also in the refugee population in neighboring countries. You can find all the details by country for this transfer in the justifications, but of course we are here and we can provide more information in writing as needed because the transfer was only sent to you last week. To conclude, this mobilization of 273 million will consume all the remaining amounts in the emergency aid reserve that were allocated for this year. So overall, 572 million was available. The full amount of 583 million will be available in 2025 with the adoption of 2025 budget. Thank you very much for your understanding and hope for a speed adoption of the transfer.
So thank you very much. Our rapporteur, Siegfried Muresan, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, President. Many thanks also to colleagues from the Commission for the presentation. Look, the situation is clear. There is more humanitarian challenges and the resources that we have available are very limited. The pressure on the budget in this respect is high. We stood united as a parliament last year in the conciliation, managed to obtain an increase of 250 million euros for humanitarian aid, and the total budget is 1.9 billion. As the Commission has just explained, we're facing several crises, and some of them are likely to deepen before the end of the year. Therefore, my question is, what is the assessment of the Commission with regards to eventual humanitarian aid needs up to the end of the year, as the emergency aid reserve will be basically emptied with this decision that we are supposed to make? Do we expect to still need more money up to the end of the year? What is the situation? And what are the conclusions for next year? Because some of the crises will not fade away, and we need to make sure that we budget adequately our humanitarian aid budgetary lines for next year. And my last question is, how do we make sure, particularly, for example, in the case of Afghanistan, we're mobilizing 40 million euros to Afghanistan, given the extreme food insecurity. How do we make sure that the money really reaches the people in need? I'm thinking about the regime currently governing Afghanistan. We need to make sure that even in those circumstances, money gets to the people in need. As concerns the work that we're going to do, we are going to vote on this decision at our meeting on the 14th of October. So I'll be looking forward to hearing from the Commission now. If there's anything else that the Commission wants to inform us about, happy to also receive it in writing in the next days so that we can give our vote at the next meeting on 14th of October. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Victor Negrescu is the shadow rapporteur of S&D.
Thank you, Chair. So I joined the rapporteur in what he was saying, that of course the Parliament has underlined on several occasions that we don't have sufficient amount in the humanitarian aid financial lines. And of course now we are affecting the emergency aid reserve, using it also for other purposes. So my questions are concrete. First is, in terms of expectations, what are the amount that the Commission expects us to be needing in the future beyond what we have allocated for humanitarian aid, but also on emergency aid reserve for similar purposes, but be as precise as possible? And the second question is that we know the position of the Parliament. The Commission was usually, let's say, unclear or not fighting enough for it. My question is, what is the Commission doing to convince the Council to allocate more resources for that? Did you send any letters? Did you communicate any reports to the Council where you present the need for additional money? Because now we are in this position of having to vote for it, and most likely we'll vote for it. Personally, I'm specifically interested in supporting the allocations for Republic of Moldova and Ukraine, but I would like to see what the Commission is doing as an honest broker to also convince the Council in supporting this in the future by identifying additional funds for it, especially that we are now discussing about the budget for next year, but also in the future, the next MFF. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Victor. From the other shadows, is there any request? The colleague Roncha or Fabienne Keller? Mr. Nordqvist. I just looked around, but You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I mean, I a bit have the same questions as the rapporteur. I mean, this budget is also a learning process normally, as I know it. You learn from one year to the next, and it seems a bit like here we are learning absolutely apparently nothing. Because, I mean, we know what we spent last year, and then we did a budget for 24, and then we know what we're spending until now. So the question is, first of all, for the rest of the year, what is expected from the Commission when we look at these crises where we are putting good money to now? I mean, is that sufficient for the rest of the year, first of all, or what is the plan from the Commission? Second of all, then comes the budget 25. I mean, we've seen the proposition. Is there any change from the Commission there? I mean, it's very low numbers that we see, and none of these crises are going to disappear within the next couple of months, as I see it. Thank you.
So, thank you very much. And now under Catch the Eye, Mrs. Oliveira. Mr. Oliveira. Oh, I saw you already. Sorry very much.
Obrigado.
Thank you.
Certamente
it's true that there are a number of aspects that we can go into more detail when it comes to the objectives of these changes in budget lines. I just had some questions on the route, or rather the choice of budgetary sources to reinforce humanitarian aid. Now, I asked this question because the Solidarity Fund, for example, and more specifically, the reserve funds for solidarity, you have a reserve for emergency response, and it's also there for emergency response to events such as the floods that we recently had in Central and Eastern Europe, or the forest fires in my country, in Portugal, currently ongoing. So I have some doubts, really. What justifies the reinforcing of humanitarian aid at the cost of budget that was allocated to emergency aid within the Solidarity Fund to deal with such events, such emergency events? Because you have other budgetary lines like the war industry that could have also been used to beef up humanitarian aid. And I think that the policy motivation would be much clearer and much more coherent with what we're trying to achieve.
Thank you very much. I would give the floor back to the Commission to clarify some misunderstandings at the end.
Thank you very much. Indeed, maybe I'll start from the very last question to clarify, actually, that as part of the midterm revision that was adopted last year, and the MFF regulation adopted, the revision of the MFF regulation adopted at the end of February, actually the two were split. So there is no longer choice whether we use the money for help of member states after floods and forest fires or natural disasters, or whether we use the money for humanitarian crisis. Actually, now the envelope is split, so we have a very clear amount that is used for the Solidarity Fund, so for all the natural disasters in the member states and the candidate countries. It's a given, and that's the amount that's available for disasters in a single year. And then we have the emergency aid reserve that is only to be used for humanitarian aid or potentially like civil protection mechanism or migration pressures. So we can't combine. In the past, there were pre-allocated amounts from 75% of the amount, and then the remaining 25% could have been used wherever it was needed. So there was a bit of a competition. What it is more important to provide humanitarian aid or provide relief to our member states. This is no longer the case. So now we had for the emergency aid reserve 572 million, which is a significant amount, and it is with this transfer fully mobilized for humanitarian aid, nothing else. And then the amount for the Solidarity Fund, the 1.1 billion, whatever it was, will be fully used for the natural disasters that happened in last year. I think you will vote on it or discuss it later. Or you actually have voted on it a moment ago. And then we will also see what remains and will be used for the disasters that are happening now in Portugal or that happened last weekend in Central and Eastern Europe. So back to the questions of the rapporteur and the other honourable members. Indeed, with this we are exhausting what remains on the emergency aid reserve, but it is also a mobilization to cover what we know will be needed until the end of the year. What we always keep is a small amount in the operational reserve for small emergencies that come between this end of the year. So we have about 10 million euros a month, which we can mobilize very, very quickly for something very unexpected. But we believe that with this mobilization, we cover these major crises, at least for this year. Overall, for next year, indeed, as Mr. Morishan clearly said and explained, we have, I think, we're all together very successful and managed to reinforce the humanitarian aid in this year's budget, and even the Council agreed to it. And I think for next year, I think this is the only budget line that is actually reinforced in the Council reading, or maybe there's one more. But so in general, I think there is understanding also in the Council on the need for humanitarian aid. However, we also have to look on the overall availabilities. So there is no, I think there's very small margin left in heading 6. And we will have again next year 583 million euros of the emergency aid reserve, which we will be able to mobilize during the year, depending on where the crisis and emergencies will appear. So it is quite substantial. As regards the help for Afghanistan, indeed, I think it's difficult to reach the people in need. Therefore, we channel the assistance through the United Nations International Children's Fund, UNICEF, and the World Food Programme to make sure that we can scale up the support and get it actually to the people in need. I think that with this, I hope I have covered all the questions.
So, thank you very much. Any further comments?
Yes, just a short comment. You say this is the amount we need. I think it's the amount we have available for these crises. It's not the amount that's needed in order to go in and work on these huge crises, which are not done this month or next. I mean, the food crisis will continue, especially in Sudan. I mean, it is a growing crisis. So just to be clear that it's the amount we have available and not the amount needed.
Indeed, but we will continue our support next year, and we have amount that is already budgeted, and we will need how much we need to reinforce from the emergency aid reserve next year again when we assess the needs. But indeed, we can only use what is available.
Our daily problem, not enough money for everything we would like to fund. So, thank you very much. So then we can go to building policy. I already saw Lena Linus arriving together with her team. Welcome to the Budget Committee. We received today an early information submitted by the EP in relation to the launch of a Brussels market prospection to identify suitable space for the relocation of staff and premises in light of the Spark renovation and prospective works to improve the energy efficiency of the Kohl building. Lena Linus, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Chair, and it is a real joy to be here again after the elections. I'm very happy to be continuing our very close cooperation with the Budget Committee and the administration of the European Parliament. Indeed, you have in your file a letter from the President expressing her information note where she is actually explaining to you as members of the Budget Committee that the Parliament, in the context of its continuous work to improve the facilities of the Parliament, took a decision last year, to be very precise, Parliament's Bureau in December 2023, to renovate the Paul André Spark building, the building where here in Brussels we have our chamber and important committee meetings, as well as our media center and some other facilities for the office holders of the Parliament and to the governing bodies of the Parliament. On the 14th of February, subsequently, the Budget Committee agreed to the proposed budget estimation, which is, of course, something still to be constantly to be informed to you. But after this, we are now here back again, not immediately today to be asking for any budgetary funds to be used, but to be informing you in a very transparent manner of the needs of the buffer building, and while doing this also launching a market prospection, and in this market prospection taking advantage of the situation that we can also find information for the potential future prolongation or not of the core building, which is the big office building Parliament is still renting here in Brussels for committee secretariats and the staff of the EPRS. So in the note or in the documentation, you see that we tell more in details of the Spark buildings, buffer building needs. We do need to be finding temporary location for the time of the works for approximately 400 to 500 persons. That includes also our president, our Secretary General and some other office holders, and then ordinary staff and staff of the political groups. We also need or are indeed trying to find information from the market whether it would make sense to the Parliament to use a prolongation option for the call buildings lease, because today, as you see in the documents, we have signed in 2016 a usufruct contract for the use of this building, but it could be that we would be able to prolong it for an additional amount of up to 15 years, between 12 months to 15 years. Now, in order to do such a decision or take such a decision, the Bureau would be the decision-making taker. We would want to be having more information, whether there are other buildings available in the market, whether there are something that would be more environmentally or otherwise financially efficient to the institution and more appropriate in its condition, and therefore we would like to combine these two market prospections. Again, as a kind of a concluding remark, this is not a request for funds as such. This is information for you that the Bureau took at its meeting last Monday, actually exactly a week ago, a decision to ask the administration to do these market prospections, and as these would be potentially resulting into a negotiated procedure, which would then at a later moment require a decision by the Bureau, the governing body, and by the Budget Committee for the use of the funds, we want to be informing you in all transparency. That also, what is important is that as Parliament is an important public entity in the real estate market, in the three places of work where it works, Parliament's seat Strasbourg, Brussels and in Luxembourg, it's important that the real estate operators knows about this in a very transparent manner. So we are conducting this as a kind of an information. It says early warning, it is also an early information so that every actor in the market is aware of these actions that we are about to take. So that as an, let's say, general overview of the file. And of course, I am happy to provide you with all details you would require. Thank you.
Our rapporteur is Olivier Chastel. Olivier, you have the floor.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As we've said, Budget Committee has received a request from the Parliament to renew this real estate market prospection notice in order to relocate some of the Parliament premises, given the works underway on the SPAC building, and also looking at the alternatives to the coal building. And it is estimated that the Parliament will need to relocate several hundred colleagues, several hundred civil servants, about 500 people is the current estimate. I'd like to thank Ms. Lunas for the detail that she's given us and the different options that she outlined. I'd also like to thank her for the responses that she gave to our written questions. During the Bureau meeting that looked at these different cases before coming to the Budget Committee, my colleague Ms. Koller mentioned the overlap of the works between the coal building and the SPAC building, the timeline there, and when it comes to looking at the different cases on the table, we might need to find a building or buildings to relocate the people working in the coal building, and also for colleagues working in the SPAC building. And we want to ensure that this fits in with the works timeline, and this was, as Ms. Luna said, about that option. Questions that I have about optimizing the Spinelli building, several options are being reviewed. For example, could we have rotation of work, given the fact that we have remote working, these open spaces? That's an avenue for reflection. We have made some progress in that area. And then finally, are our services thinking about collaboration or discussion with other European institutions? For example, is there any way that we could collaborate or work together on this, or to take in other services? Because here we're looking at Parliament services having to be relocated for the duration of the works. Thank you.
Madame Linus.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you also to the Standing Rapporteur for this very, first of all, clear questions, as well as also to the very good cooperation that we have had also in the last 2.5 years of the last parliamentary term. Indeed, the question that was asked by Madam Keller at the meeting of the Bureau a week ago, we have been studying it and reflecting it, and it is also a very good idea. So what is the actual question? The question is that could we actually combine these two market prospections, these two lots that are going to be presented to the market, and using, for example, finding a building that would first be used for the temporary location, and then after the temporary location is no longer needed, the buffer building for the SPAC renovation, until that moment having prolonged the coal buildings usufruct lease, then move into that building. So the answer is that yes, we are studying this. At the same time, we need to be making sure that throughout all of this time, we are using the budgetary funds in a correct manner. So we need to be, we have written the market prospection text in such a manner that allows, first of all, there is a lot of transparency for our requirements, our needs, what do we want to do, so we are being very fair towards the market. But what we also then need to be taking into account that we do not, for example, for the duration of the works, which is going to be more or less 4 to 5 years, possibly shorter, it depends on how everything goes, that we are not renting too much space for that amount of time. So we will be discussing and with the market prospection seeing what the market has on offer. And from there to jump immediately to your third question, Mr. Chastel, do we have cooperation with the other institutions? Yes and no. First of all, we have had a lot of preliminary contacts already with the Committee of the Regions and Economic and Social Committee. But of course, every institution and every body has their own situations that are a little bit volatile. Every institution has their situation that moves. In addition, we have had contacts with the Commission, but the Commission is itself at the moment conducting a lot of market prospections in order to find buildings. So actually, Commission, who is our dear partner in many matters, can also be seen in this case also as our competitor. So we are, of course, now trying to find solutions in a good manner. And indeed, there are certain ideas that could be coming from, indeed, the Committee of the Regions or the Economic and Social Committee. Optimization of Spinelli. That is also then, in a way, linked to your fourth question, who needs to move? A lot of people need to move. We are talking originally of 800, a little bit above 800 that are currently in the Spark building. And naturally, that will entail certain cascade moves. It means that I think we all agree that it is clear that the President of the European Parliament cannot be located in a buffer building somewhere far away. So she and as well as certain other services that are crucial to the functioning of the institution, such as the plenary services, protocol services, they need to be kept in a centrally located area, either in some areas in Spinelli or in some other areas. Not necessarily in, not a lot of people need to be in the Spinelli, because Spinelli today is, of course, a building mainly reserved for the offices of the members. So members is the only, I would say, group that absolutely doesn't move, except for Madam President. Others will be, there will be a lot of moves. There will be cascade moves, and we are still in this process of studying how does it all go and how does it all work and function. And indeed, then for Spinelli, there are certain areas in the area surrounding the library where we will be looking into certain optimization of space. But voila. So thank you very much, Mrs. Chair.
As
and I know I took too much time. Thank you very much.
As our time frame is tight, directly give the floor to Jean-Marc.
Yes, very quickly, I will ask a few questions on behalf of Nils Uzakov, which couldn't be there here today. It relates to the energy efficiency of the coal building and the renovation by the owner. First question is, what specific energy efficiency improvement are planned and what cost saving are expected as a result of the renovation of the coal building? The second question of Nils Uzakov asks you to clarify exactly what the owner will start with the the owner will start the renovation. Is it before or after 2025? Third question, are the renovation a key factor for the European Parliament regarding its decision to prolong the user-free contracts? And fourth, is the EP expected to participate in the cost of the renovation done by the owner? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And now we have only Mr. Sieper, I think.
in German, please.
You can continue. No
Ich würde gerne
Einfach weitermachen.
Haben alle? Ja, herrlich. Ich würde gerne auf eine Sache.
I just wanted to get into one point mentioned by the rapporteur that you didn't answer specifically, and that is the question to what extent the market analysis is built into the other planning. What about home office, shared workplaces, and so on? Just to use your imagination, unlike the 90s, I don't think anyone actually needs to be sitting here nowadays. People on my left and my right and the interpreters wouldn't actually need to be here. We could do all this digitally, but if we think in those terms, we should apply that to what we want to spend on buildings to accommodate our institutions. In that process, we need to think about how we can work digitally and save on our space requirements.
Von der Corona-Zeit gibt
I was the chair of the Budget Control Committee during the Corona pandemic, and I can only say it's a very good thing to be able to meet one another physically rather than talk to each other over a screen or just hear a voice. It's a completely different working environment when you can talk to another and you're not speaking through technology. I think the new technologies nevertheless must be used. Mrs. Lunas.
And if you allow, first of all, apologies to Mr. Sieber. It is totally correct that I did not answer that question. The first on the home office and on the teleworking and on the digitalization. We have had in the Parliament, if I remember well now, the years between 2013 and 2015, a big program on going into something which is called New World of Work, which there were several discussions on whether we would be going into so-called hot desking. So we have been in a way an institution who started in a very early stages of time to be looking into what kind of savings we could be making, and not just savings in financial terms, but also savings in people's, let's say, working methods, in working in a different manner. And that is, of course, a project that has been put in place in several member states. Many countries use hot desking and home office, and indeed, during, as you said, Madam Chair, during the times of the COVID, this was also, of course, very much done in here. Parliament's Bureau has had certain very preliminary discussions about this. There has been wishes for the actual, so because in Parliament we need to be defining who is, that there are different rules in a way that apply to members, to staff of the political groups, and the so-called pure administration. And as regards members, there was a lot of discussion under the presidency of the late President David Sassoli on how to learn the lessons from COVID and how to be doing certain things differently. The majority of the Bureau, as well as the Conference of Presidents, wanted then subsequently to go into a relatively strongly presence-based parliamentary work. For staff, and now I'm talking about the pure administration staff, we have 2 days of teleworking per week, which is a possibility that can be given by the management to staff member who is requesting. And therefore, we have had preliminary discussions already with the Secretary General, and now when the Bureau working groups have been established last Monday, I'm sure that this question will be also coming in there. Parliament's administration is answering to this question so that we are getting ready for different options. We are studying how much we would be able to save in case we would be going to more digital home office space working way. And how on the other hand, if we need to be providing everybody a permanent seat and a permanent desk, what would be the consequences? Not just consequences in immediate budgetary terms, but also in organizational terms. Both have organizational and financial advantages and disadvantages, both ways of working. But we are in a process of doing this. Then to Mr. German, on behalf of Mr. Usakovs, thank you very much for these questions relating to the call building. We have or actually you have, the Parliament has regulated on energy efficiency of buildings very recently. But this has been already done before. We have had the current energy efficiency of buildings directive, which here in Belgium belongs to regional powers. So the one who is in a way regulating us in Parliament here in Brussels is the Belgium Région Bruxelles Capitale that has a certain local legislation in force which is called plage. And according to plage, we have different stages of plage. There are various aspects, be they the way how we insulate, be it how we use renewable energies. So there is a kind of a, how would I say, cocktail of different measures that we will be improving in case we would want to be staying in the call building. And the answer to whether we as an institution would be taking part of those costs, the answer is no, that is not in our intention. We have, and that's partly one of the reasons why we want also this market prospection. We want to be able to have as much information in our hands so that we know what is the current situation. When we have done the contract in 2015 and signed it in 2016, of course the situation has been different. Then I'm very sorry, Mr. German, I missed your third question. I'm so sorry, I apologize for this. Because I think
the third question, we have to be a little bit hurrying. Yes. We should hurry a little bit.
No, the question was, is it a key factor in the decision regarding the decision to prolong the user-free contracts?
The energy efficiency, yes. The energy efficiency is going to be part of the decision. So we will be, of course, analyzing all aspects. It will be taken into account because, of course, if we would be getting from the market a wonderful offer of a wonderful super energy efficient building, why would we then be staying in the call? So it is always a totality which we will be taking into account. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much. Now we have to change the European Commission. An exchange of view on concerning first 4 building projects of 20,000 square meters each to replace buildings in Brussels whose contract is due to expire or are reaching the end of their life cycle. Monsieur Becquet, voilà.
Merci Madame la Présidente. Je vais...
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll try and deal with the 4 files at the same time to save time. These are 4 buildings which all represent about 20,000 square meters in total, 76.5 thousand square meters, replacing a little more than 100,000 of old buildings. These are 4 buildings in the European district, and they will host a number of DGs which have to vacate obsolete buildings which are being sold as part of the 23 buildings. As you know, each one of the new future buildings has a PEB of A, very good energy performance therefore, and will go from 190 kilowatt hour per square meter per year to 92 for the same criteria, so will significantly save the energy consumption of those buildings. some of the buildings will be equipped on the ground floor with commercial premises, which will bring shops closer, and this is a request made fairly frequently by the regional authority. One of the two buildings will also have part of it set aside for residential accommodation, fairly limited, but it's still important to contribute to this effort to ensure a multifunctional rather than monofunctional district. And one of the files relates to office space, which will be attached to the conference centre, which will soon begin to be built. I think I've set out the main outlines of the four buildings, and I'm very happy to answer any questions you may care to raise. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Olivier.
Merci. Merci.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation, for the documents received as well, because our committee has received 4 requests for pre-information by the Commission about the occupation of 4 spaces of 20,000 square meters between 26 and 28, and a usufructory lease will be sent us in the last quarter of this year or the first quarter of 2025. So this is part of the Commission's property policy, which is intending to replace end-of-life buildings or with expiring leases. And we've heard the total space is about 100,000 square meters to be replaced over the next few years. Thereby, the Commission will reduce its total office space by about 25% by 2030. And this market prospection, therefore, was started up, and the search for the buildings above ground relates to two areas, Arlois-Montgomery and Botanique-Isère areas. I have a minor technical question about the timing of all this, because for the first buildings we're talking about 2026. Do we have sufficiently early information to allow those buildings to be occupied from the beginning of 2026? And another question is one that we've already raised in the committee when the European Commission took up space in the North District. A few years ago, the trade unions were very concerned about the security situation in the North District of Brussels and for all the staff, the officials working there. So is this relocation not perhaps a problem for the staff members concerned? And lastly, are you already aware which parts of the Commission will move over there and how many officials will be embodied in that move? Thank you very much for your answers.
Thank you.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, yes, indeed, there is a timing question. However, this is linked to the obligation we have when we conduct a property search. This is something we've done for several years. Parliament has also begun to conduct market prospections. We cannot accept proposals unless the building promoter has received a permit, and those permits come in very late. That's the way the region works. It's not for the first time that we've faced such a tight timetable, and I'm not therefore particularly concerned by that question. Of course, we must be careful to ensure that the building that's coming on stream first out of the 4 will be processed in due time. Now, as for the Northern Light building, it's true that in 2023 there were concerns raised by our colleagues in the executive bodies, and these were passed on by a number of trade unions. We've been able to shed some light on all these matters and reassure the colleagues, and currently we are not hearing any worries or fears anymore at all regarding possible security or safety problems. Now, we have thought in terms of stepping up the security for staff, the security arrangements for staff. That turned out not to be necessary. And in terms of the executive agency colleagues who moved. That's an 800 square metre section of North Light. They are very happy with their move, and they are finding their feet quite happily in that new district. And also the links with public transport is somewhat better than where they were previously located. That said, the 4 buildings under study today aren't part of the North District. Now, in terms of who will occupy those 4 buildings, we are planning to install FISMA, TechSud, INDPA, International Partnerships, Home, and DG Budge and ECFIN over there, a total of 4,600 staff members who will move, but they will be reconfigured when they move. We'll go on with the dynamic collaborative space model, where there are 7 workstations per 10 members of staff. I think that covers your questions.
Président, j'espère simplement que la réponse...
Madam Chair, I hope the answer that we've just heard won't take colleagues in the Commission aback too much. Yes, I saw the expression.
On behalf of my colleague Nils Suzakov, we would first like to welcome numerous of the EC building strategy, including the planned reduction of office space, the measure foreseen to become climate neutral in 2030, and the fact that all the Commission buildings in Brussels complies with legal prescription regarding the accessibility for persons with disabilities. First, 3 questions, more specific. First, what are the main differences between the original and revised plan for the CPE 6 building in Brussels? Second question, did you calculate how much money is saved because EP and EC are sharing building for delegation, representation, and so on, instead of having separate premises? And third question, in the long run, how will the Commission reconcile the planned reduction in building space with a workforce which is, despite the stable staffing policy, is still growing? Thank you very much.
Ich bin mal gespannt auf die Marktuntersuchung.
I'm eager to hear about this market prospection. The Gare du Nord North Station isn't the ideal setting for most staff members, so I hope that doesn't happen. Any follow-up questions from the shadow rapporteurs? I see no one at the moment. No one? Mr. Bicky.
Oui, merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I didn't understand very well the third and last question. If you could repeat it, please.
En français, comment est-ce qu'on...
In French, how are we going to reconcile the reduction in space of 25%, as our colleague reminded us, with the ongoing increase in staffing levels in the Commission, despite the pre-announced stability objectives? CPE 6 is in Luxembourg. It is a building which houses small children. We can talk about it if you like, but it's not one of the 4 buildings here. Now, it's making headway, it's progressing, it's Luxembourg state that's building it for the Commission, and it's replacing 2 old pieces of infrastructure which will be given up when the time comes. If I've understood your second question, it relates to the representation offices in the member states. For the moment, this responsibility is still in the hands of DG Communication, which it shares with the European Parliament, and internally we've been thinking this one over. We haven't quite reached a conclusion, but possibly the DG for Communications may devolve to the OIB management of those buildings, and thereby harness more synergy with Parliament. Parliament is interested in this. We've got quite a number of projects working together like that. In terms of the space reductions and how that might impact on increasing staff levels, in 2018 and 19 in the Commission, to remind you, we set up a horizontal working group with human resources, the two infrastructure offices, OIB and OIL, DG Budget, DG Information Technology, and we looked at what's going on in our buildings and what the actual presence of staff in those buildings was. Now, this was before COVID, of course. No one had any idea of what was coming our way. What we measured was a presence rate, physical presence of 7 colleagues out of every 10. Why were 3 not present? Well, they might be travelling on business, they might be on leave or holiday, or they might be off sick, or they might have external training. So that was the average, a fairly stable average across DGs and across buildings. When we began in 2021 to implement what we were calling the DCS, where you would have 7 workplaces for 10 people, we were basing ourselves on that 70% presence rate. So everyone pre-COVID would have fitted in. But then with COVID, you had teleworking, which we still have with us, appreciably so. Of course, people have to come to the office a certain number of days per week, but we've got much more flexibility in that direction, which means that we are still tracking each building. Each building and each DG is a little different, but we're not worried about being able to accommodate everyone. And in times of crisis, when a DG has to bring everyone in, there would be enough meeting rooms and space to house everyone, allowing them to work using modern technology.
So, dann können wir gleich zum nächsten.
So, I think we can now move on to the next agenda item, which is an exchange of views on the institution's building policy of the Commission.
Submit a report on their building policy to the budgetary authority. The Commission is the first institution to present their building policy this year, to be followed later on the year by the European Parliament and the External Action Service. This exchange of views is a very good opportunity to better understand the Commission's real estate policy and the main projects ahead. Partly we heard already about it, but Monsieur Biquet, now the full picture of the policy of the Commission.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Comme vous le savez.
Thank you very much, Chair. Now, as you know, in 2021, we adopted a policy within the Commission that lays out our real estate strategy. By the end of the year, we will have 10,000 Commission staff colleagues, plus 1,500 in Luxembourg, that will move over to this new way of working that we call Dynamic Collaborative Space, DCS. And today, we have already reduced our real estate space by 100,000 square meters. So our objective is by 2030 to reduce by 200,000 square meters, and we've already reached half of our goal. So we want to be quite ambitious. We want to be quite ambitious in our goals to reach this reduction of 200,000. Now, 10,000 colleagues have made the shift from 25,000, so that's already a good percentage. But of course, this is its own beast because we're working on this transition with DGs that are affected, and we take 6 months to 1 year with the DGs in question to stay in conversation with them to make sure that we can in fact respond to their needs. There is, of course, one aspect within this policy that's very important, and that's greening. So we're starting with an aging and very low-performing real estate portfolio. You have PEB energy certificates of C and lower, and we're trying to move towards buildings with PEB efficiency ratings of A. This year, we took up a building on Rue du Commerce, number 46. This is our first building that uses no fossil fuels. So these are the improvements that we have been undertaking in terms of greening. Furthermore, we also implemented some policies when it comes to heating or air conditioning in summer. And the fact that we're using DCS, this allows us to close entire buildings during the summer break. Colleagues can adapt. They can just go to another building to work. And this, of course, allows us a great amount of flexibility. Now, as I said, in 2024, DG Employment has now moved to Commerce 43. It was previously housed in 3 different buildings. And our target for next year is the following. We plan to move DG Near. It's currently housed in a building that needs to be renovated. And so this is a move that will take place in 2025. We will also, you have DG Translation that is housed in Ever. And we would bring them back here. So we would have no more buildings that are outside of the European quarter, and that will lead to greater efficiency within our services. Now, you have the Commission Secretary General. That's something that has not moved at all, but they are going to move towards a DCS functioning, which will lead to more interaction and greater fluidity when it comes to functioning. Now, in the future, what do we plan to do? We're going to consistently publish calls for tender when it comes to real estate, because there are some buildings that we've sold off. We've sold to the Belgian state that have then been sold on to real estate developers. Now, of course, we have to look at this case by case. There's no obligation here, but we have to see what comes out of this, what comes onto the market, and what could nonetheless always feed into our overarching objective of reducing the number of square meters. We've already been reduced our real estate by 100,000 square meters, so you've reached 50% of our goal. I'll stop here, Madam Chair, and I welcome any questions.
Olivier.
Thank you very much. Olivier Chastel, please. Thank you very much, Chair. So we have a very comprehensive document before us. Mr. Beke provided us a great summary. And this document definitely provides us an update in terms of the evolution of the European Commission's real estate policy. I have some questions nonetheless. The first question now will be no surprise, because once again, this document once again talks about rationalization of management within OIB and OIL thanks to some savings due to synergies within the competent services. So in a way, these services were doubled in Brussels and in Luxembourg. So there is some rationalization that can be implemented. Now, my question, do you have perhaps other examples for the future where such rationalization could take place? Are the savings that have been made already something that can be quantified? Second question. Now, greening, the Commission. This is something that has been part of a communication that talks about a pretty ambitious real estate policy. And here we're looking at reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 60% by 2030. Now, where do we stand in terms of greenhouse gas reductions? In 2019, it was 43%. And we know that there are some buildings rather that are going to be renovated. You have Berlaymont building, the Charlemagne building, and this renovation will begin in 2029. So will the Commission actually reach its ambitious goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions within the set time frame? And now I have a question on the Jean Monnet building in Luxembourg. Now, EIB was meant to take up a part of that building. Where do the negotiations stand? Is that still going to be possible by the end of the year? And do we have a clearer idea of what part of the building the EBI would like to occupy? And lastly, are the EP representations, or the Commission representations rather, abroad? There are buildings in Lisbon, in Marseille, and in Milan. So we are looking at an interinstitutional agreement with the Parliament. So is this really making progress, and what is exactly the state of play with Lisbon? Thank you.
Ich würde jetzt mal alle Fragen gleich zusammenfassen.
So I'd like to collect all the questions because we're running a bit late. I had a couple of questions.
With the city of Brussels to rejuvenate the European quarter and the North Quarter, because there are quite several concerns by the staff about security in the North Quarter. Secondly, a specialized question about JRC. JRC is in need in Karlsruhe about new laboratories for absolutely to meet modern standards of laboratory, at the same time in the area of greening, and to meet all necessities that the European Union is able to tackle the nuclear dimension in our research. To what extent have you considered this request in your planning in 2025? Jean-Marc.
Oui, merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Chair. I already asked some more general questions in the previous round, but perhaps one additional question that is linked to the measures the Commission is undertaking to envisage savings and move towards carbon neutrality vis-a-vis existing buildings. I'm often quite surprised that every time I go to my office, the lights are on. I think it's quite easy to put something in place whereby lights only come on when someone enters and they go off when you leave. I've still not found the light switches really to switch on and off the lights in the two different sections of my office. I mean, it might seem a bit caricatural, but I think that there are some very practical measures that can be undertaken when it comes to the functioning of our buildings as a whole.
Further shadows who wish to speak? Monsieur Buquet.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Chair. I'll take the questions in the order they were asked. Now, collaboration between OIB and OIL. Where do we stand? Specifically with respect to Luxembourg, where do we stand? Now, the cooperation between the two offices is increasingly close. And this is something that can be described through very specific examples. For example, OIB developed a software for OIL that could lead to quicker, much more efficient management of children being assigned to daycare centers. And this is a clear example of the synergies between colleagues, where colleagues don't have to really, waste time thinking about what has going to happen with their kids, because there's a software that easily manages this. And there are other developments as well that go in the same line. There are a number of exchanges taking place in terms of IT tools, but also when it comes to procedures and processes, when it comes to finding efficiencies. For example, if there's too much on one of the offices, they can hand over some tasks to the other office, which is not facing so much pressure. Now, we have also tabled a draft for a service level agreement to the EIB, and we hope that we will be able to reach an agreement with them by the end of the year, or hopefully earlier than that. And also to be quite clear in terms of OIB, OIL, now at the Commission level, we're not looking at merging the two offices. That's not on the cards. But perhaps we could come back to this if required at a later stage. Now, greening and savings in buildings. There are perhaps two figures that would help us to better understand what this represents. So if we want to further green the Commission, we have our goals for 2030. And to do this, we have to reduce our CO2 emissions by 20,000 tons. By the end of this year, we should have reached a reduction of 8,000 tons. So not halfway, but just about. But in any case, this is an ambitious objective, but it's a realistic one. And as you can understand, that this involves everyone. You have buildings that are not highly performing when it comes to energy efficiency. However, there are other buildings that are highly performing, and then you have other buildings that do not use any fossil fuels at all. And then there was another question on how exactly we can automatically switch off lights in our buildings. Well, this is an issue that we face in the Commission as well, especially in the Berlaymont. So we are replacing the entire internal lighting system in the Berlaymont building to replace it with LED lights, and also to have a centralized management so that lights only come on when you enter and they switch off when you leave. And also when we do these projections on the Berlaymont facade, we have some, lights in offices that remain on nonetheless, but we're looking at centralized management to control all of this, and this is also applies to heating, cooling, etc. So this is all part of the renovation works that have been planned. I'll come back to the rapporteur's question on the dynamic spaces. To what extent has it been rolled out? Now, as I said, we have 10,000 Commission staff that have already moved over to DCS. So little over a third. And we have about 50% of the executive agency staff that have moved over to DCS. Jean Monnet, too, I've already touched on that. We're in the final stretch with the EIB. And we should hopefully reach an agreement with them soon. Now, the representation offices in Lisbon, Marseille, and Milan. Now, these are buildings that belong to DG Com. As I said, there are also some internal discussions underway where we're talking about transferring these buildings and their management to OIB. And we are going through these files case by case with the Parliament, because there are some differences between one city and the other in terms of how these buildings are managed. So it's very important that we have a clearer management policy that's more streamlined and it makes sense for both the institutions. And now the chair also asked a question. You asked about cooperation with the Brussels city management. Now, we are regularly in touch with the individual at the Brussels government region that works with cooperation with the EU institutions. So every time we're planning to take up a building, then you have the developers who need a building permit as well as environmental permit. And when we're talking about modernization of the neighborhood, that's something that's quite quite important to us as well. We've sold 23 buildings to the federal government, and there's an agreement between the federal government and the regional government that these buildings will become 60% offices, 30% housing, and 10% other services. So this will lead to a better mix in the neighborhood, and this feeds into the modernization of the neighborhood. And the Commission has no problem renting a building where part of it is actually for housing or other services. We're absolutely fine with that. And now with respect to Karlsruhe. Now, it's a city I know well. It's really a very complicated file, I have to admit that, because the requirements for this nuclear laboratory are very high. They're very strict. It's not just an office building, if you like. This is a competence of the JRC, but at the same time, we do provide technical input through our master architect. He, of course, speaks perfect German and can participate in all the exchanges with the different service providers. But unfortunately, this is a file that was in a very unfortunate state because the previous contracting party withdrew. You know all of this very well. And a recent call for tender has led to the emergence of a new contracting party. So we do hope that we'll be able to make progress now with this new partner, and we'll be able to bring it to a successful end.
Excuse me?
JRC. The JRC is in the plan of 2025. This was my question.
No, they are not part of our plan, but we are talking with them, and we'll see how they will evolve. But that's a separate branch.
Okay, then. Olivier ne veut plus. Alors on va changer.
Okay, nothing else. So now we move on to the next topic on the agenda.
Globalization Adjustment Fund for displaced workers. So there we have our colleague Michalis Hatipantela, and he would normally present his report, but I have the report here now instead of him because he is not able to be with us today, so I read it out about the EGF. So, dear colleagues, the Committee on Budgets has received a request from the Commission to mobilize the European Globalization Adjustment Fund for displaced workers to co-finance personalized service to workers made redundant in the Belgian multinational chain of supermarkets Match Smatch, or Mats Smatch. Mats Smatch faced a difficult economic situation for several years, and in an attempt to prevent the further accumulation of losses, Mats Smatch accepted Colruyt Group's offer to acquire 57 of 84 stores, also taking over the store's staff. 8 additional stores went to Carrefour, Intermarché, and Delfood. The EGF is an instrument aiming to express EU solidarity with workers being displaced due to major restructuring events and help them to find new, better jobs by improving their skills and employability. With an annual budget of 30 million for 2021 to 2027, EGF can help workers by co-financing projects and measures such as informational and occupational guidance, vocational training, as well as business creation. In the current request, 513 workers were made redundant in Match Smatch, of which 365 displaced workers will be targeted beneficiaries. The EGF can be mobilized to support the reintegration in the labor market. In total, 2,661,464 euro will be mobilized for the EGF for Belgium, representing 85% of the total cost for the proposed actions set out in the report. I propose to support this mobilization and look forward to working with the shadows in order to make the funds available as quickly as possible. I would give the floor to Jean-Marc Charmin.
Oui, Madame la Présidente, merci.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for presenting this document. We too would support this request from the Belgian government. The EGF is an indispensable tool given current situation as well as what awaits us in the future. Now, we are in this specific situation where most of the employees that will be affected by this restructuring are either 50 years or older. So it's very important to allocate significant funds to ensure that these men and women can find a job that fits their skill set. So these funds are not just financially necessary, but they're also necessary because the European Union must, in a way, live up to its own demands, because it would be a difficult moment in the men and women affected by this restructuring. They should not just be able to make it through this difficult period, but it should lead to progress, perhaps, a new phase in their careers. So they will change jobs, but at the same time, they will improve their skills and their remuneration levels as well. My group and myself would like to support this and hope that this procedure will be concluded as quickly as possible. We will do what we can to ensure that that is the case. And we will, of course, discuss with the rapporteur some amendments, but we are very much in favor, and the idea is to make progress on this as quickly as possible. In terms of the MFF, the allocation to the EGF went significantly down from 300 million to 210 million. So I think we really must think about this. We must reflect on the initial parliamentary report and what we've asked for within the next MFF, because these sort of tools are not just important. It's not just important for Europe to intervene in these decisive moments, but in fact, it's very important for our European economies also to be able to change, adapt, green, adapt to digital technologies, ICTs. And in order to do all of this, Europe needs to be equipped, and we will definitely fight for this. Thank you.
Merci bien. Et maintenant, Olivier.
Thank you very much. And now we have Olivier Chastel for Belgium. On behalf of my group, of course, Madam Chair. This is a file, of course, that I know well, because the Maths Match group for a number of years now has been in a very complicated economic situation. It's a sector with very fierce competition, with many waves of redundancies. The most recent one, of course, was quite significant. These redundancies affect staff that is not highly skilled, and therefore them re-entering the labor market will be quite difficult. So therefore, the Belgian government has requested a contribution from the EGF following these redundancies. Now, as my colleague has said, the conditions for attribution of funds are fulfilled. They're well known. The concerned regions in the Hainaut, Liège, and Namur provinces look at 513 workers being affected, and the financial contribution would cover 85% of the total cost. There's also been a reskilling and training cell that has been set up, and that brings together trade unions, the Walloon region, the employment office, Forem. And so the amount that has been requested from the fund is 2,661,000. 365 people will lose their jobs, and they will then participate in different measures in terms of career reorientation, reclassification, professional training, and they will also gain new skills, both in the IT sector as well as language skills. So the Renew Group definitely supports this request from Belgium.
Olivier, und no.
Thank you very much, Olivier. And now we have the colleague, Mr. Sipper.
It's good to see that the report calls for swift mobilization of the European Globalization Adjustment Fund to assist those workers displaced from a match. This is a clear demonstration of European solidarity. When unexpected challenges arise, and we talked a lot about them today, there are a lot, we come together and to make sure no one is left behind. I would like to talk once more for a short period of time about the workers that are affected, because I'm pretty sure some of them will be watching this debate. And as my dear colleague already mentioned, it's not only that they are over the age of 50, many of them, it's also the emotional stress that is connected to a situation like this, where not only yourself see your job and your future endangered, but all the people around you. So you have this group pressure that also brings you down, and therefore we have to show those people our support. The EGF support isn't just about providing immediate help, as has also said before. It's about building a path forward for these people, to give those people hope that they can keep on living the life that they build for themselves. So, as this example shows, Europe workforce continues to rely on the European Globalization Adjustment Fund to support those affected by significant restructuring events. However, with the introduction of the €30 million euro annual cap, it is essential to evaluate whether the current budget allocation is sufficient to meet also the future demands. So the upcoming midterm evaluation in 2025 should provide a comprehensive analysis of the fund's impact on beneficiaries, as well as assess the sufficiency of the annual caps and ensure that the EGF continues to serve as an effective tool of solidarity in the European labour market and therefore in the European Union as a whole. Thank you.
Ganz herzlichen Dank. Und jetzt
Thank you very much. And Mr. Filipko from the Commission now?
Ah, sorry, I missed my colleague Oliveira.
Obrigado.
Thank you very much. I'll be speaking Portuguese. Of course, our group supports this request, where we will use the EGF to, in one way, compensate at least one part of the losses experienced by these workers as they lose their jobs. It's going to compensate for just one part of the damages and the losses, because these workers, like any other, they don't really need compensation measures. They need their job, they need their wages, they need a prospect for the future and to be able to plan their lives accordingly. They need a professional activity that allows them to plan for the future. So the measures that we're discussing here, mobilizing these funds, it's just compensation. It only compensates part of the damages, the losses experienced by these workers that are losing their jobs. Now, what these workers need and what all other workers need are not just simply remedial measures when they are faced with redundancy. What workers actually need are policies that value workers, that value their contribution, that look at development within your job. We need economic policies that are oriented towards satisfying society's needs, but also oriented towards full employment. That has to be a goal. that have an objective that is improving working conditions, improving the lives of workers, so that scientific and technological development and the economic impact of such developments can also in some way reflect positively on the lives and working conditions of these workers and other workers. So that was actually what these workers needed. Unfortunately, that's not what they're getting. That's not what this fund allows for. But of course, we will support this compensation, at least for part of the losses that these workers will suffer.
Philipp Kopper.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thanks to all of you for the support of this mobilization, because indeed, as we all recognize, it's very important to help the people. I would just maybe, for the last contribution, I think it's very important to actually stress that it's not only unemployment benefits, actually not at all. It's exactly helping the people to find new way, to train them, to help them look for new jobs. So this is exactly what the assistance is for, to help the people at the moment when they lost the job, to provide them with training, help them learn the computer education, support towards business creation, incentives and allowances for job search and training allowances. So it's really not unemployment benefits. It's exactly helping them to make the next move as far as possible. As regards the overall amount, indeed, it was significantly decreased in the last midterm revision, but it was also based on the experience that we have over the past, 14 years. There were, I think, only one example where the amount exceeded the 33 or 30 million that is available now. This year, with this mobilization, we will mobilize 7.6 million. And the remaining amount there might be one more mobilization later this year. We are still assessing whether that mobilization will be eligible, but otherwise the remaining amount will not be used and will lapse. So indeed, I think it is important for the next MFF to assess how we support the upskilling and making sure that people get the right education and skills for the new era, and how we can help also in this with the globalization and changes in the markets. But for the moment, I think the amount of the 30 million we see is actually sufficient for the mobilization and for the cases that we have received in the past.
So thank you very much. I have to remind you that on the 1st of October at 12 o'clock is the deadline for amendments, and amendments are to be tabled in English only. The vote will take place at the meeting of the 14th of October. Now we change to item number 12, the draft amending budget number 4 to the General Budget 2024, the update of revenue, own resources and adjustments to some decentralized agencies. And there, Siegfried Morizan, our General Rapporteur for the 2024 budget, presents his report.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Indeed, at the beginning of September, the European Commission presented to us the DAB4. We then had a first discussion with the shadow rapporteurs and the Commission, and now I'm putting the report in front of you colleagues. The report basically foresees an increase of the GNI contributions of member states by 5.6 billion euros because the customs duties were reduced by 4.5 billion euros, and also because of the lower contribution by the United Kingdom due to the under-implementation of the Brexit RAL. We then discussed with the European Commission and asked, look, why are the customs duties revised downwards by 4.5 billion euros? And we understood that this is the consequence of changes in the international trade of the European Union, particularly following the terrorist attack by Hamas against Israel and the people of Israel on the 7th of October, which has changed the imports of the Union, in addition to the impact which the invasion of Russia into Ukraine had. So less trade, less customs duties. This means that member states have to increase their GNI contributions. Of course, we also mentioned in the report the fact that, look, the absence of own resources leads to such variations, and we are using this report to once again call upon the Council to make progress on own resources. But of course, this DAB to one yearly budget is not the place to clarify the whole own resources debate. But we are seeing negative consequences of the lack of own resources. Then I'm also including in the report the fact that, and this was mentioned by Victor Negrescu, and he's right, he was correct when he mentioned it in our first discussion, the rebates of member states are adjusted to inflation, and of course the whole MFF is just adjusted to the 2% deflator, so basically the rebates of member states are such increasing, and that the rebates of the member states who receive rebates are increasing, and therefore the burden of all other member states is increasing accordingly. These two things we're just mentioning, facts as they are. But of course, these are to be discussed, seen eventually, in the context of future negotiations. This is not something to be solved during an MFF, but it was important to mention it as they do have a financial consequence. So basically, the DAB is mainly about the increase of GNI contributions due to, as I said, the downwards revision of the UK contribution and the customs duties. And then there are also, in terms of expenditures, some very small net increases of 12 million euros for agencies, basically in the context of new competencies received by those agencies, and then, as we know, the unfortunate situation with the rental of the European Medicines Agency in the United Kingdom, something that we, of course, also have to learn and to improve a bit our contracts in the future. Of course, none of us anticipated Brexit, none of us anticipated that we move from London, but this was discussed at the beginning of September, that, such developments should be dealt with more carefully in the future, and we should try to avoid it. This is what the DAB is, in line with the discussion that we had at the beginning of September, in line with the observation of the shadows. I'm putting it in front of colleagues right now. Deadline for amendments is 1st of October, and then we will vote on this on the 14th of October. Madam President, in the committee, and then final vote in October too in plenary. But as I said, it's rather a more technical DAB. This is it from my side. Thank you everyone, and thank you also to the shadows for their input over the course of last weeks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Siegfried. Now Victor Negrescu.
Yes, we already discussed this issue, and of course I tend to agree with most of the points underlined by the rapporteur. But I think, of course, despite having a report that has technical aspects, I think it's also a political issue. And the political issue is linked to the role of the European Parliament in controlling the Commission, but also our role as budgetary authority. I take the opportunity of this discussion to underline once more the need for the European Commission to provide full answers to the questions that we raise here, and the fact that it is not enough only to give a short reply to the issues that we raise. So when we discussed initially this issue, I forwarded the question, I addressed the question. My question was, is there an internal report in the European Commission explaining who is responsible for the mistakes that were made, the lessons learned at least, in terms of, first of all, evaluation of level of custom duties, in terms of the evaluation of the interest rates, in terms of the contract that was signed for the European Medicine Agency. Because we are always asked here to vote for these draft amending budgets and ignore the responsibilities of those that made the mistake. So I think, of course, we have to use this draft amending budget number 4, which has clear issues that are linked to errors made by the Commission, to call upon the Commission to do such reports when we are confronted with this type of situations. Because again, we are discussing here openly, but us as members of the European Parliament, we are asked by our constituents what is happening with EU money. And we believe also the Commission needs to provide adequate answers to those issues with clear explanation, not simply say it's a fact that we have a decrease by 18.3%. It's a mistake, the fact that we are paying for the offices in UK of the European Medicines Agency, and no one introduced there a clause that everyone has, even when renting their own houses. So I think here, again, I think this political dimension should also be referred to in the report, and I'm confident that together with the rapporteur, we can, of course, approve the technical aspect, but in the same time underline what is political, and this is very political. Thank you.
So, thank you very much. No other shadow rapporteur is present in the room, but we have catch the eye, Monsieur Sanchez.
Oui, merci, Madame la Présidente.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. This DAB4, Draft Amending Budget 4, for 2024, we're seeing adjustments for several decentralized agencies and own resources as well, particularly when it comes to revenue prospects and the lease in the EU, the UK of the agency. We had 18.3 reduction in 2023. That's a huge loss of own resources for the EU. It's about 4.5 billion euros. I'm not entirely convinced about how we can explain such a miscalculation here in this current situation where we're seeing a lot of pressure. We're seeing increased GNI, gross national income, and that's a burden for national citizens. And then this DAB also looks at an increase in budget for agencies. We think that this shows bad management by certain agencies, perhaps serious mismanagement, and we need to give more funding to these agencies. So I have a few quick-fire questions, particularly Eurojust, the increase there, these inflation forecasts, and what's the situation there? And then EMA, the European Medicines Agency, we spoke about the premises in the UK, but I think there's also another issue that we need to take into account. We're seeing a decrease in income due to leasing out the building and looking at financial difficulties that WeWork is facing vis-a-vis these premises. We need to balance the situation. So who carried out these negotiations? That'd be my first question. What are the margins? What is the area covered by this building? We need all of the technical details. And then finally, the DAB includes the mobilization of the flexibility instrument. That's supposed to be a last resort, but we're using that more and more often. So isn't it high time to find different approaches and to find longer lasting budget solutions rather than just systematically using these emergency instruments? That would allow us to improve forecasting of income in the EU and also to better manage public funds. We're seeing a growing fiscal burden across the EU. Thank you for your attention.
Merci bien. I would like just to remind you that the deadline for amendments will be the 26th of September, a little bit earlier at midday. Yes, 26th, so that that there is no misunderstanding. And the Council is due to adopt its position today on the 23rd of September. So for everybody, 26th of September at midday. Yes. I was reminded that I have to give the floor to the Commission, to Ms. Philip Cover, that you can explain your ideas on this draft amending budget.
Thank you very much,
You
Madam.
received so much support that I thought that...
Indeed. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I'm very sorry that Mr. Negresco, that the reply that I provided last time wasn't sufficient, but I can explain again in detail how we forecast. We can also have a parallel session and explain to you how we do it. So it is not, and I really disagree with it, it is not an error. It is the best possible forecast as regards the customs duties. This is the best possible forecast we can do. So the process for forecasting all own resources basically starts in, for example, for 24 budget, we have done this forecast in spring 23. We have taken the ECFIN forecast, the forecast of the trade patterns, the forecast of the increases of the trade, we forecast on the basis of the past what the rates on imports could be to calculate the overall volume, so that we can apply the retention for the member states and how much should be actually collected for the EU budget. There we meet with the member states in the advisory committee on own resources every year, where we present this forecast in detail also for the other own resources basis. And we agree with the member states that at the moment in May 23, on the basis of these economic forecasts, this is the best possible forecast of the collection of customs duties from 2024. Then when it comes to 2024, we do the same exercise on the basis of the updated forecasts of the economic patterns received for DG ECFIN. But at that moment, we also have the amount collected in the first 4 months of the year. And at that moment, we compare the forecast based on the economic assumptions with the extrapolation method based on the collected amounts in the first 4 months. We again meet with the member states. We present the results of these two forecasts, and with the member states, we agree what is the share of the forecast based on the economic and the extrapolation. And then sometimes we think, okay, this is more conservative, so we go 2/3 for the extrapolation method, 1/3 with the forecasting method. Whatever we agree in that meeting, we then apply. And then, as a result, whether it is increase or decrease, leads automatically to a change in the gross national income contribution, because it is a balancing resource. So we calculate how much we assume to get in the customs duties. We calculate how much we should collect from the VAT-based resource, how much from the plastic. Then we calculate on the best possible estimate how much we get from the other revenue. And then whatever remains to be financed, we continue the rate of call of the gross national income. So, as I said last time, the EU budget is expenditure-driven, so we first know how much we need to finance, and we know exactly the steps how to calculate, how to contribute. Because it's member states, and I agree, in this particular case, it of course increased quite significantly the member states' national contributions. That's why all this is discussed, all the forecasting and the inputs and the basis are pre-discussed and agreed with member states. So I really don't think it is a mistake and there is someone to hold accountable for it. It is the best possible estimate, the best possible forecast. Sometimes it's not very accurate, as was this case, and there were very specific circumstances as relate to the trade patterns, as Mr. Rapporteur Mureșan clearly explained. The other one on the Medicines Agency building in London, we had several discussions, of course, for the new members. It might we might repeat and present or send again the building file. Indeed, the building was negotiated by the Medicines Agency. It's an autonomous body. It's a legal personality, so they negotiated. Of course, we were part of it. We advised them. We saw the file. And then when they negotiated with the owner in London, who offered them some discount for the first few years in exchange of not having the breakout clause. Then the Medicines Agency came to the Budgetary Authority, both to the Budget Committee in the Parliament and in the Council, presented the file without the breakout clause, and at that moment in 2014, we all thought it was a perfect deal, because we didn't expect that we will have to move from London, and we didn't expect that on top of that there will be COVID and people will stop coming to the office. So again, with the hindsight, it would have been better to have the breakout clause, but we didn't know that at the time, and it was a decision by the Budgetary Authority. So again, I don't think we can hold anyone accountable in the Commission for that. We all would have done better, and now I think we bearing this in mind, we look at all the new building files with that in mind. As regards the financing by flexibility instrument, sometimes sometimes to the displeasure of this committee, we are looking for redeployments when we have to reinforce agencies. to find a way how to best serve the agency. Sometimes it is not appropriate, or sometimes there is no program that fits and that would fit for the offsetting. So we need to mobilize additional resources. If there is no margin in that heading, then there is no other way than to do it than mobilize flexibility instruments. So I think with that I've covered the points raised.
Just for information again, for those who were not there, the European Parliament was not happy without breakup clause, and we decided that Commission and Council is against our wish acting. So we were not happy at all, because normally we do it in all our contracts, and we introduced this at this time. But Council thought and Commission thought that it would be better. Now we are paying the bill for it. So it is as it is. We cannot change it anymore. And pacta sunt servanda. So we are facing now a complicated situation. And it's quite costly, because London has not a very good time at the moment, or since several years. But it's not our fault, not our error. So thank you very much, dear colleagues. Are there any comments? Does anybody wish to discuss furthermore? Because I think we are at the end of our meeting. Thank you very much. Have a nice evening.